So we started last time. We did something a little bit different, less focusing in on the, I don't know, the meaning of, or the kind of the moral meaning that we might want to take from the text, and more just like a very interesting kind of detective story to work out how it is the book of Proverbs ended up being incorporated into the canon, and how did the rabbis understand the book of Proverbs. And I want to take just one step further in that, which I think is really interesting. It's about the shift in the rabbinic tradition when the rabbis created what I'd like to call the myth of the Torah. It's what my teacher, Rabbi Joel Lewis, calls the myth of Torah, which is the role of Torah in the creation story, and it's connected to the book of Proverbs. That shift in rabbinic thinking, which is a very momentous shift in rabbinic theology, is connected to the book of Proverbs. And when you see the shift, it kind of explains a lot of things about how the rabbis understood what Torah is. And at the same time, it will help us to understand how the rabbis made sense of incorporating a non-parochial text in the Torah. And I've said this a few times, that the book of Proverbs, as we've seen, is not really about Jewish stuff at all. It's not about Exodus from Egypt. It's not part of the Jewish story. It's not about the Exodus from Egypt. It doesn't mention the covenant at Mount Sinai. Doesn't mention keeping Shabbat. It's just not part of that whole. It hasn't got the whole swing of the rest of the Bible. It's concerned with a thing called wisdom, and it was part of a broader intellectual current in the Middle East. The people across the Middle East were writing this kind of stuff about how to be in the world, and their writings flowed from country to country. There are parts of the book of Proverbs that look incredibly similar to writings from Egypt and Mesopotamia and other places in the Middle East. So it's a very, very different form of literature that's found in the Bible. And what I want to do today is look at how that gets folded into rabbinic culture, how it gets folded into rabbinic culture. So
sorry I'm late, Joel. Sorry I'm late.
Not at all. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Very nice to see you. Okay, so we looked last time. Oops, I should be able to see that now. We were at the end of chapter 3, towards the end of chapter 3. And last time we focused in on this piece, her ways are ways of pleasantness and all her paths of peace. She's a tree of life to those who hold to her, and happy is everyone that she supports or that support her. And we had an interesting conversation. Alan was very involved in that conversation about, when we sing that very seriously in our Torah service, when we're putting the Torah away, very poignant, very, very powerful thing to sing, and lots of beautiful tunes to that. And we read it as if she is a tree of life to those who hold on to her. He was talking about Torah. And Alan even talked about the eight Chaim, the handles of the Torah scroll, as if it's even physically referring to the Torah. And what we looked at last time was the fact that actually that isn't talking about Torah at all. Its original context is talking about wisdom. It's a wisdom that's the tree of life. And that's an amazingly daring thing for the book of Proverbs to write, because this is the first reference to the Eitz Chaim, the tree of life, outside Genesis. Book of Genesis, there's no indication that you might get back into the Garden of Eden. And here they're saying, no, actually, if you hold on to wisdom, if you get wisdom, then that will be like holding on to the tree of life, which is like getting back into the Garden of Eden. So it's an incredibly bold thing to say, but nothing to do with Torah. To do with wisdom. It's to do with this abstract knowledge about how to live in the world, which is the overriding concern of the book of Proverbs in its original context. That was last time. I mean, even that I think is amazing and really interesting, and it should we should feel a little wobble, little tremor, little vertiginous tremor as we sing Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim Ba in shul. It's a little bit like that the knowledge of what we've seen now is like there's something that that's revealed that should give us a little tremor there. And then the last line there that we touched on but didn't read so much last time is Adonai, chapter 3, verses 19 and 20. Adonai b'chokhmah yasad aretz, chonen shamayim b'tuvuna. God by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding, he established the heavens. What's the implication of that? That's also a very crazy claim, but what's the claim that's being made there? Like God, it was with wisdom that God established the earth. And with understanding, he created the heavens. What do you think the book of Proverbs is saying there?
Rather begs the question of why did he create the earth in the first place and the whole of humanity?
Right.
Why did he want to do that?
Where did the desire come from?
Yes, did it come to create something in his image?
Right, it certainly means that the world is shot through with Chokhmah. Like Chokhmah was there at the very beginning. Whatever Chokhmah is, Chokhmah is like a personified goddess in a way in the book of Proverbs that we've seen a number of times. The kind of goddess of wisdom. And she was there in the founding of the earth, meaning I think it means that Chokhmah is the kind of is the way the world is established. Like the world was established through wisdom, and we can kind of tap into that. I think what Richard's saying in terms of God's image, that we also have the capacity to tap into Chokhmah, to become wise, to understand the world, and thereby in some way to be in tune with the nature of reality.
For me,
we might say that about science. We might say something like there's something peculiar, and this is true. There is something peculiar about the human brain that allows us to actually understand the structure of reality. Like it's
For
not.
me, it is an invitation to love the nature, to admire, to be wow, to be surprised all the time how fabulous it is.
And not just awe, I think also probably comprehension as well.
Yes, yes.
I think so. Aristotle says this too. Like the Greek authors say this too. There's something in us which parallels the nature of reality. Like we've grown up within the created order, and we're fine-tuned to understanding the created order. Like, why does maths work? Like, why is a mathematical understanding of the order of reality? Why does it work? And the answer is there's something in nature, there's something built into nature, which is attuned to our capacity to understand it. And the search for wisdom is in some way a search for the nature of reality, like the search for knowledge, the logos, the underlying form and structure of reality, which we can understand. And the more you're tuned into that, the more likely you are to lead a good life. Like if you want to know, you don't want to fight against reality, you want to live in tune with reality. So the more you understand the chokhmah with which the world is created, the more you're likely to lead a good long life. And that's why I think it says, like her ways are ways of presentness and her paths are paths of peace. Because if you get this thing, which is called chokhmah, you're living a good life. And that it's not just a good life, meaning, you know, what a nice life. It's you're living in accordance with the nature of chokhmah, which is built into the nature of reality. Like you're leading a life which is conforming to the nature of reality itself.
So that's our search for wisdom. Whereas here it's saying God already had the wisdom.
He did. He did, and we can find it. I think that's the point, Richard. Like it's shot through the, it penetrates through reality. That's why we can find it. That's why we can. Yeah.
So this Chokhmah is not just science, because you referred to the laws of nature, on which the Earth was founded, and you can talk about mathematics, but Chokhmah, as I understand it, is more than that, because it's you have to encompass how to deal with the people in the world. So you then go into other realms like psychology, and so presumably all these other methods of getting Chokhmah derive from the. You think they derive from the original scientific principles on which the world was founded?
I don't think that. I'm just thinking that that's what the book of Proverbs is suggesting. In some way, that there's an underpinning wisdom to the nature of what they call wisdom, logos, law, structure, rationality, sense to the world. But this is which you can understand, you can get into, you can have a get of it, like so that you can understand, that you can have more or less of a grasp of. And I agree with you. I think that also includes sociology and anthropology and psychology, and a good life will be one led in accordance with that. This is a very Greek way of thinking. Very Greek way of thinking, and it isn't. It's not talking about being in tune with God's will. It's talking about being in tune with the underlying Chokhmah of the universe itself, because it was Chokhmah that the world was built with. It was wisdom the world was built with and out of.
I don't know if you know Euler's formula, Joel, but it is talking about beauty of mathematics. I've just sent it to everybody. It is the most beautiful formula in the world.
Oh, go on.
Which is, I've just sent it to you, which is e to the power I pi plus 1 equals 0. And these are a set of irrational numbers. E is Euler's number, I is square root of -1.
Yes.
Pi is for calculating, if you want, the circumference of the world, and that is a number which goes on to infinity. And if you take the formula e to the power I pi plus 1, it equals 0. It is just an astounding formula. And these are the basic numbers of mathematics, e, I, and pi.
Okay. Can you put it in the chat, Richard? Can you put it in the chat?
I've just done that.
No, Richard, you sent it to me directly.
Yeah, you sent it to me also, please.
Sorry, I meant to send it to all.
Okay.
That's great, Richard. Look, what I would say is, thank you, that's it, we've got it now. What I would say is, like this is, it's not exact, it isn't clear to us why it is that maths works the way it works. Especially, and it's not clear why we have the capacity to do that kind of mathematics, or any mathematics. And it's also not clear to us why the world seems to work according to mathematics. But it does seem to be something that's in the nature of the human brain. Like, it's a connection. I don't think we should get lost in this, but I totally agree with you with those kinds of mathematical formulae. But the fact that we can create mathematical formulae that accurately describe, I don't know, the movement of planets, or gravitational pulls, or any aspect of the physical world, is mysterious, I would say.
And it's not just you can use to describe it, Joel. I mean, I've been looking at it for a bit. It's the fact that they come down to very simple equations.
Yes.
E equals mc squared. I mean,
yes.
It's the mass times the speed of light squared.
Yes.
I think it's just an astounding formula.
Yes.
You're right. The path followed by planets around the sun.
Yes.
It's a simple formula.
Good.
It's just weird.
It's totally weird. And look, clearly someone writing 2,500 years ago in the book of Proverbs is not aware of, is not in our scientific world. But to say that Chokhmah is the underpinning of the world is some kind of nod towards the idea that the world is created with order and structure, with logos. Like the Bible doesn't normally talk like that, because the Bible's very interested in God's will. And it's much more interested in tuning into God's will. But this writing is talking about the underpinning wisdom of the universe.
Yeah, I would like to answer to Richard that the formulas are so simple, it seems to me, because humans defined these notions in a way, and it's not the same as, I mean, this is fantastic about humans, but it's not fantastic about nature.
I mean, the crazy thing is that
I disagree with you, Joanna.
Yeah, I disagree.
I think it's absolutely wonderful about nature. I'll give you one other thing before I stop interrupting. The speed at which the universe is expanding, if it was 0.0001% different, if it expanded any quicker than that, then the matter would not form. If it expanded any bit slower than that, it would all collapse upon itself. Now, one can try and rationalize it, but it's just one of the wonderful mysteries of life. I mean, this Euler's formula, pi, I, E, 0, and 1, these are fundamental numbers, which are all irrational numbers, and yet you can put it into that formula. It is just amazing.
Yeah.
It's a big mystery to me, I have to say, Joel. It's gone.
It is a mystery. It is a mystery. But the author of the book of Proverbs is in some way nodding towards that mysterious nature of reality, I would say. Okay, so and the Bible doesn't normally talk like that. That's the interesting bit, is the Bible never talks like that. Like, you know, when does the Bible talk in those kind of terms? Let's look at, I'm going to jump to chapter 8, where it's the longest section in the book of Proverbs that talks like this. Okay, so this is Proverbs chapter 8, verse 22. Adonai kananani reshit darko. The Lord made me at the beginning of his way. Kedem mifalav me'az, the first of his works of old. What are we talking about? We're talking about Chokhmah. We're talking about Chokhmah. God made me reshit darko, at the very beginning. God made me. Me'olam Nisachti merosh mikadme aretz. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning of the earth was. Ve'ein tomot cholalti, when there were no depths, I was brought forth. Ve'ein mayanot nifbadti mayim, when there were no fountains abounding with water. Ve'teren harim atba'u lifnei gavaot cholalti, before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth. Like, so this is a hymn of praise to this chokhmah that precedes the created order. Blah 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 blah. Gonna jump a little bit, but it's all talking about the different bits of the creation story and how chokhmah, wisdom, precedes all of them. Verse 30. Ve'yeh etzlo amon. Ve'yeh sha'ashuim yom yom. Mesacheket lefanav b'chol eit. Then I was by him, I was with him, with God, as an Ammon. And I was daily in all delight. Sha'ashur is like play. God would play with me. I was like the toy that God played with. Mesacheket lefanav b'chol eit, always playing before him. Mesacheket b'tevel artso, playing in his inhabitable earth. V'sha'ashuai et b'nei Adam, and my delights are with the sons of men. That's wisdom speaking. God made me with and it's crazy language. God made me first thing in the creation story, and I was Ammon. We don't know what Ammon means, and we're going to look at a midrash on that in a second. And look at a midrash on what is Ammon. What does it mean to say that this thing, this wisdom, was set up as an Ammon, it's like a plaything for God. And I was hanging out with God and playing with him like a toy, and I was I was jumping around, and God enjoyed me, Chochmah, and then I got into the earth. I was sort of playing. I played in the earth too. I danced in the earth, and I really enjoyed hanging out with humanity, which is back to like Richard's thing, meaning something like there was a creature that could actually hold me as well, and that was humanity. Humanity could also think about me. Like humanity has the capacity to think about Chochmah. The only other creature in the earth apart from God who has the capacity to hold Chochmah. Okay, it's wild language, really wild language, and very, very interesting, very creative idea, but a very novel idea that Chochmah precedes creation. There's no indication of that in the Bible, in the creation story. The creation story, I mean, it sounds heretical. Like, you know, the creation story that we have in Genesis tells us the order that things were created in. And here's the book of Proverbs coming along and saying, before anything was created, God made me. Adonai Knanani Reshit Darko. God made me, verse 22, as Reshit. The Reshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. Here's the word Reshit coming up again, all the way from the creation story, and they're daring to say that the very first thing that God created was Chochmah, before the creation of anything. Like wisdom and rationality and logos was created first of all, before anything else. It's amazing. The book of Proverbs is so daring and somewhat heretical at this point, I would say. It's heretical.
How do you reconcile that to the concept of the world being tohu vavohu, which is like full of nothingness?
Yeah, amazing. Totally. I totally agree with
it
you.
wasn't full of nothingness there at the beginning.
Well, this is the author of the book of Proverbs writing. You know, we're writing many hundreds of years after the creation story had been penned, but this is an alternative version, I would say. You're absolutely right. Like what began? Like I think, you know, one of the things that's very interesting in the Jewish myth, in the Jewish myth of creation from Genesis, is that we begin with chaos, and God carves order out of chaos. It's a chaotic beginning. It's all entropy at the beginning, and then God gradually carves up structure and order. And in this version, in the book of Proverbs, the very first thing that God creates is order. Is this personified wisdom, which then is God hangs out with wisdom. They play together. It's weird. It's a really amazing language. Okay. Now that would be interesting in and of itself, just in terms of I hope you're following. This is kind of different from what we've been looking at before, but that in and of itself is fascinating. But I want to look to show you the very, very first midrash in Breshit Rabbah, which is in the very, very first midrash in the main canonical Amoritic midrash, and it's a little bit hard to read, but it's really worth putting a bit of effort into. Okay, so this is Breshit Rabbah Aleph Aleph, like Genesis Rabbah, page 1, chapter 1, page 1, right at the very, very beginning. That's the beginning of the Midrashic project, I would say, something like that. The beginning of Midrash. Okay, now it's Reshit bara Elohim is the first line. In the beginning, God created. Reshit bara Elohim. Rabbi Oshaya Patach. This is it's called the Patichta. Like the way that these midrashim work is they'll quote a verse in the Torah, and then they'll quote some weird as hell verse from somewhere else. In this case, from Proverbs chapter 8. And the job of the darshan is to find a way back from the weird verse to the beginning verse. Like, you know that in the structure of the midrash, there's going to be a journey which takes you all the way from the quoted verse, the weird verse, in this case in the book of Proverbs. They'll find a way of connecting that all the way back to the opening verse they started with. In this case, Reshit bara Elohim, God created. In the beginning, God created. So that's what the structure is of this kind of midrash. And so we know we're going to get back to Breshit at the end of the midrash. So it's Rabbi Oshaya Patach. He opened up with a weird verse. V'hietzlo amon v'yesh ha'ashuim. I was with him as an amon and as a plaything. That's the verse he's quoting, and that's the That's the one we looked at in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 30. I was with him as an Ammon, and I played with him all day. It says Chochmah speaking, and says I used to hang out with God and play with him. Okay. Now we don't know what an Ammon is, so the Midrash is going to take some stabs at working out what Ammon means. Ammon, pedagogue. Ammon is a pedagogue. Ammon, muchuseh. Ammon means covered. Ammon, mutzna. Ammon means concealed. Eat Amri. There are those people who say Ammon Ravta. There are those people who say Ammon means great. Okay, this is what Midrashim do. We're gonna have a stab at working out what Ammon means, and we got 4 different versions of what Ammon might actually mean. All of them, remember, in the book of Proverbs are how Chochmah describes itself hanging out with God. I was with him like an Ammon. So Breshit Rabbah says there's 4 different things that Ammon could mean. Okay, then it goes through and brings a proof text to prove each of them. Ammon pedagogue. Ammon is a pedagogue, as it says in the book of Numbers. As the guardian, Uman bears the infant. And so Uman sometimes, or Ammon sometimes, Aleph Mem sometimes means like someone who looks after a child. I was an Ammon. I was a pedagogue. Which means, that's a crazy idea. A pedagogue in Greek culture was someone who raised your children, not when they'd already left the family home or left the infancy. They left the company of women, and they're being introduced to the way that life actually runs. And so there was like sometimes a slave who was a pedagogue, whose job it was to kind of teach the child the way of the world. And so, a pedagogue was someone who's like taught the path of reality to the kid. And the Midrash is saying here, I was God's Ammon, meaning I was God's pedagogue. I taught God how to make the world. I taught him the paths that they should be. I taught God how to make the world. I was God's pedagogue. Ammon, second explanation. Ammon means covered, as it says in the book of Lamentations 4:5. Those who were clad in purple, meaning he's reading it. Ammon meaning covered, dressed in purple. So I think the claim here is something like that wisdom is covered. Wisdom is concealed or covered. It's not obvious. You have to there are layers. You have to unlayer it. You don't find that easily. Whatever wisdom is, it isn't something that's on the surface. It's covered, and you'll need to be initiated into it. Next one, Ammon mutzna. Ammon is concealed, and for that they bring a proof text from the book of Esther. Vahi uman et Hadassah, that he concealed Hadassah, like that Esther was hidden. It wasn't revealed that she was Jewish. She had a hidden nature, there was a hidden reality to Esther. Last one, Uman Ravta. Uman is great, as it says. Now they're getting to a weird Aramaic thing here. It's a kind of a weak proof, but they try and they show using the Aramaic translation of Nahum that Uman sometimes means fantastic, means great, powerful. So those are the four explanations of so far with I was with him as an Ammon. Meaning wisdom, I suppose we're reading it at this stage, with wisdom in the book of Proverbs being this thing that predates revelation, it predates creation, teaches God, is hidden in some way, it's underneath creation, but it's also great. It has a greatness to it. Okay. Now the kind of twist in the tail. Devar acher, amon, uman. Another way of thinking is amon means uman, an artist. HaTorah omeret, anihi hayiti kli omenuto shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Torah itself declares, I was the artisan's tool of the Holy Blessed One. I was God's the tool by which God made the earth. And that's Torah speaking. And this is the Torah declaring that he is the Uman, or the Amon, the artist. I was the artist through which the God created the world, says the Torah. Well, let's bring the midrash. I'm happy to interrupt you, otherwise I just.
Where does it say that in the Torah, Joe?
Say again?
Where is that in the Torah?
No. This is rabbis. This is the rabbis speaking.
Oh,
This is when the Torah says that here in the book of Proverbs. So great question, Richard. It's Proverbs chapter 8 verse 30 where that happens. Ehiyeh etzlo amon. I was with him as an amon, and they're reading amon as an artist, as an artist's tool. Omanut is art, and they put that into the words of Torah. So the midrash says this is Torah speaking. I was with him as an amon. I, the Torah, was with him as the artist's tool when God was considering making the earth.
So they're taking a proverb as Torah.
That's even more powerful than that, Richard. Someone else want to take a stab at what just happened? That was the sleight of hand. That was the sleight of hand that changes everything. The sleight of hand is to say that Chokhmah is Torah. The Chokhmah is Torah. That wisdom is Torah. Torah is speaking in the book of Proverbs and says, I, Torah, was with him as an artist's device, as an amon. I was the one, says the Torah, who was there before the world was created. I was the one who played with God. And I was the one who found my delight with the sons of men. I, Torah, was there at the beginning of creation. That's the way the midrash is developing. And let's see how they play that one out. In the way of the world, the flesh and blood king, he builds a palace, but he doesn't build it with his own skill or his own understanding. He builds it with the skill of an artisan or an architect. And the artist doesn't build it from his own consciousness. Ella difteraot the pinkasot. He builds it through plans and diagrams. Yeshlo leida heach uose chadarim upishpishim. He looks in if he wants to know how to arrange the chambers and the doorways, then they all get written down in plans to create a building. Kadosh Baruch Hu mabit b'Torah uborei olam. And so the Holy One, blessed be He, looked into the Torah and created the world. So the midrash here replaces the idea of Chokhmah being hanging out with God in the beginning of the world, and replaces it with the idea of Torah, which is Chokhmah. Torah is the physical manifestation of Chokhmah, of wisdom. And it's Torah that's hanging out, and it's Torah that God looks in when God creates the world. When God wants to build the world, he looks in the Torah to know how to make it. A very, very weird idea that no hint of that in the Bible at all. The Bible in no way partakes in that idea. But here's a radical new idea that's coming from the rabbinic tradition, which is the Torah predates the universe. The Torah that we have predates the universe.
And in some way predates God as well.
Not clear. Like it's. Sorry, say that again, Leon.
Because I mean, if God is looking in the Torah to find the
Yeah.
blueprints. It's as though the Torah, in a way, like predates God as well.
Not clear. Not clear.
Not clear, but right.
Yeah. I think we're going to see that. Let's see. There's different ways of reading this last little bit. Like, did God create the Torah? Yeah. I think, but good question. I mean, totally. I mean, like, first, like, the Torah never talks like that. But here we have an idea which is so radical and so changes our understanding of how one might think about Torah. To say that Torah is like the blueprint on which the world is created is a totally revolutionary and radical idea, I would say. Joanna, please.
Yeah, I have just a question because it is really mind-blowing. It's genial. And when was it written? When people had such a chutzpah to say it's fabulous. And this is what we believe, in fact. We all believe that Torah predated creation. I mean, in our Jewish way.
Right, believe in a Jewish way. That's right. So that's why I think it's so interesting to see this midrash, because this is
when was it
right. So Bereshit Rabbah was written over a very long period of time. It's probably Amoraic. It's like somewhere around the same time as the Talmud. But it's edited into a document, and it's very, very important. This is the first midrash, meaning like, when you open the books, page one, chapter 1, page 1 of Midrash Rabbah. And so you're right that this is like a Jewish way of thinking. And if you ask ultra Orthodox Jews, probably even modern Orthodox Jews, then they will talk in this way. People talk in this way as if the Torah is in some way the kind of blueprint of the created order. It's like, it's not parochial. It's not parochial. And it's not parochial because the book of Proverbs is not parochial. I think this is what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to say the amazing thing about the book of Proverbs is it doesn't tell a little story about a people escaping from Egypt and finding its own country and having a little relationship with its tiny God and just getting on with its own stuff. Like, some of the Bible's very kind of Jewy and parochial, but the book of Proverbs is the least parochial book in the Bible. It's not about the Jews at all. It doesn't mention any of that Jewish stuff. So the book of Proverbs is universal. It's saying, it's making incredibly bold claims about the nature of the world itself. It's making global claims about the nature of reality. And it says that, it says like, I wisdom, was there from the very beginning, etc. And that's, when you read the book of Proverbs, you think, wow, that's really a different type of literature. They're making non-parochial claims. And what this midrash has done, and what the rabbis do, is take all that non-parochial, universal, cool stuff, and they just say that, well, Torah is Chokhmah. Whatever Chokhmah is in the book of Proverbs is really talking about the Torah. And that's a systematic way that the book of Proverbs is read. So if you read the commentaries by the classic commentaries on the book of Proverbs, they talk as if the Chokhmah that they're talking about in the book of Proverbs is really talking about Torah. It's really talking about Torah. It's not talking about this universal non-parochial thing at all. It's talking about Torah. And Torah itself is non-parochial. Torah itself is a universal phenomenon. It's like a force of nature. It's like the blueprint on which the earth is created. That's how very, very many Jews think. I agree with you. Please, you want to say something?
Excuse me, when the book of Proverbs was written?
Oh, that I really don't know. I mean, it's late. It's still being discussed by the rabbis in the Talmud whether it should be included in the canon. So those questions of canonization, but I think obviously later than the Torah. I'm really bad at this stuff about the history of the evolution of the writing down of the Bible. It's really not my thing. Nachum is good at that. Shibi's very good at that. So I would defer to their superior reading around that question. Okay.
So what the rabbis have done here, just like they did with the Eitz Chaim, they've commandeered
Yeah.
the idea, the principle that Proverbs is putting forward, and they've commandeered it to relate it to Torah. So when we're singing, when we're singing Eitz Chaim He, I mean, since last week, like you pointed out to me actually when we were doing the Torah service, we should, well, perhaps I should be, or perhaps I will be thinking of wisdom, rather than those wooden poles that people were lifting up.
I don't know. The rabbis would be disappointed because the Midrash has so thoroughly penetrated our consciousness. It's an amazing thing that they got away with this sleight of hand. It's wonderful. Look, I don't think you should be thinking about wisdom. I think you should be talking about Torah, but I think you should be talking about Torah as a source of wisdom. Meaning, it's not the parochial Torah; it's the universal Torah. It's the Torah which has a universal nature and which leads us towards wisdom. The purpose of Torah is wisdom. The Torah is wisdom. It's a source of wisdom. That's a crazy thing to say, by the way. Like, that's just a crazy thing to say. Like, when we started this whole conversation about the book of Proverbs way back when, Cheryl was like, I've never seen anything in the Bible like this. How can it be talking about psychology and talking about how to be in the world and talking without reference to Shabbat? It doesn't mention kashrut. It's just talking about how to like ways of life that are good, like to lead a good life. Like, it's cool that the Torah is giving precise sort of like this interesting detail. Now, that is cool, but that's not the way. That's not the end of the story. That's I think what the simple meaning of the book of Proverbs is going in that direction. But this midrash and the rabbinic tradition in general co-opts the book of Proverbs into its agenda of seeing Torah as the source of wisdom, and seems to be saying something like when you read Torah, it is the pursuit of this universal wisdom, a wise way of being in the world, and that's a very aggrandizing project. Like it's not just a little Jewy project anymore. It's this project to try and understand the nature of reality and to be a good person in the world. It's a much broader project, and it's the midrash. This midrash is the starting point. It's a very subtle midrash that shifts us. Now, because I definitely wouldn't want you to say, "Oh gosh, the rabbis are cheating, or they're lying, or they've manipulated." Like, it's a very clever move to take the book of Proverbs and to read Chochmah in the book of Proverbs as if it's Torah, and they do it consistently all the way through. Like, the book of Proverbs is transformed into a book which is extolling the virtue of Torah as a source of universal wisdom.
It still doesn't answer, Joel, my original question.
Yes.
In the sense that it's saying how it was created, with wisdom if you want.
Yes.
But it's still, I still don't see why was the world created. And I'm
why was the world created?
Yeah, and I'm sure, I'm sure an enormous amount has been written about that, whether it's been right or not.
Yes.
But did God want to create us in His image?
Yes. Okay, so look, we're not going to answer that question here, but that is a question which the Midrash answers. The Bible, I'm not sure ever answers that question.
I've never really thought about it in that depth before.
Yeah.
But your explanation of wisdom being how He created it, which is lovely in its own way.
Yeah.
It really poses the next question of why.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's see if there's anything in the next line. We'll just finish this off, and then we've gone through that interpretation where Torah is Ammon. It's amazing. It's such chutzpah. So they read back in and say, like when the book of Proverbs says, "I was an Ammon hanging out with God, fooling around with God before the creation story," the rabbis read that and say Ammon is Torah. And it's possible that that's also the way you ought to read the bit before about Ammon Pedagog, Ammon Mechuseh, Ammon Mitznah. Like, it's possible what they're saying there is it's the Torah. The Torah is God's pedagogue. And I think that is the way the rabbis understood it. It's the Torah that was providing advice to God when He was creating the world. It's the Torah that's covered, meaning it's got wisdom, which is it's a covered source of information. You have to peel away the layers. It's concealed. And it's the Torah that's great. And I've got a lot to say about what it means by great, but I don't want to go into that now. Maybe some other time we'll go into how the rabbis understood the Torah is a great piece of literature. But all of that is chutzpahdik. It's a transformation that comes from reading Ammon as a reference to Torah, as opposed to Ammon as a reference to Chochmah. So just the very end of the Midrash that brings us back to Bereshit. V'haTorah omeret, the Torah says, Bereshit bara Elohim. This is the end of the loop that's done in the Midrash, where it starts with Proverbs and comes back to Genesis. It's this section here, in the blue. V'haTorah omeret Bereshit bara Elohim. And the Torah says, in the beginning God created. The Kama Kitvei Yad, and there are a few handwritten versions that add here, Be Reshit bara Elohim. Be through me, Reshit bara Elohim. By means of me, Reshit God created.
You read it. You're saying you read it as Be Reshit rather than Bereshit.
Yeah, that's the Midrash, and that's a reference to Reshit in the book of Proverbs. So if you look at the book of Proverbs, where it said here at the beginning, Adonai Kananani Reshit Darko, God created me at the beginning of his way. And the Midrash says, the Reshit bara Elohim. At the beginning, Reshit God created, or Be Reshit. There are different ways of reading this, but the Reshit is a reference to Chochmah. Reshit.
There's also another way you can read Bereshit. Doesn't actually mean in the beginning, it means in a beginning, because it's, well, the way the Masoretes vocalize it was in a beginning, not
in a beginning. But Reshit is a very strange word, because Reshit is actually smichut. It's smichut. Reshit Darko. You see here, the reason why Reshit, it's Reshit Darko is the smichut form, Alan. And
yes, okay.
And it's actually smichut in the Genesis as well, which is like, it's very bizarre. The beginning of, and that's a kind of grammatical anomaly in the Bible on that very first line, which the Midrash here is maybe addressing. Like, what is the Reshit? What is Reshit in the book of Genesis? Reshit is Chochmah, and they're learning that out from the book of Proverbs, because it says Adonai Kanani, God made me Reshit Darko, beginning of his way, and they're saying, that's the Reshit that's referred to in Bereshit. That's the textual reference to God creating Chochmah at the very beginning, which the Midrash is reading as the textual derivation for God either creating or creating with the Torah. But the Torah then becomes it's through me, through the Torah that God creates. It either means God created Torah first of all, or it means God created through Torah. Both of those readings.
So the B is Torah speaking.
It's yes, exactly. B is Torah speaking in the using, and then let's just read the next line, then we're going to go to the Ein Reshit El Torah, and Reshit is Torah. Reshit must refer to Torah. How do we know that? Heach ma da'atamar, like it says in Proverbs 8:22. Adonai Kanani Reshit Darko. God made me Reshit of his way. And so Torah becomes the starting point for the creation of the world. And Torah was there at the very, very beginning. And that's the kind of textual derivation for the Midrash, which describes a king looking in a book to see how he should build his palace. Well, how did God know how to build the world? He looked in the Torah and he made the world. A very, very weird way of twisting, of changing the meaning of Torah. But what it does do, it gives Torah, I will just say couple more sentences and then over to Joanna. When I say this is the creating of the myth of Torah, what I mean by that is Torah itself, from this point onwards, plays a role in the Jewish mythical understanding of how the world came into being. Before this Midrash, before this rabbinic way of understanding, God created the world from God's will, and the Torah wasn't involved in that at all. The Torah came later. The Torah was like an afterthought. Torah was a parochial document that was given to a bunch of slaves after they'd been released from Egypt. this midrash transforms the Torah into a mythic object in the creation story that God looked in to create the world. It massively elevates the status of Torah and says that Torah is now the kind of blueprint of reality. And that would explain to a Haredi person, maybe it might even explain to us, it's a kind of weird way of thinking, that if you want to really understand the nature of reality, you might go and look at science, but you'd be better off just looking in the Torah. If you want to understand, like, why do people spend all their time looking at it? Because that's where everything is found. That's where turn it over and turn it over. Everything is within it. This is when you read Torah, you're looking at the book that God looked at to make the world, and therefore everything is contained within that book.
Yes.
And this midrash is the beginning of that idea. This midrash is the lodestone. It's the beginning or the clearest articulation of that idea. That Torah study is in some way a way of getting at the nature of reality itself, and that's a revolutionary idea that informs a lot of rabbinic thinking. It's a revolutionary idea that isn't contained within the Torah. It's a rabbi idea. There's no hint in the Bible that the Torah was the document that God used to create the world. There's no hint that the Torah itself is a mythic object in that sense. It's not part of the Jewish creation myth. But after you read this midrash, then you're seduced into thinking that the Torah is a document that was used to create the world. It's the document that was actually used to create the world. And that's a revolutionary and a very important idea in Jewish thinking. Johanna, please.
Yeah, in this midrash, the rabbis don't speak about wisdom.
No.
They jump directly.
Yes.
I mean, you make it understand. You make us understand
Yes.
that there is this connection, but without you explaining,
right.
It seems very arbitrary.
Well, that's what Alan said last week when he said, like, the rabbis read Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim as talking about Torah. She is a tree of life to those who hold to her, and the rabbis say, well, that's Torah. But that is a midrash. That's a drosh, because what it really meant was chokhmah. What it really meant was wisdom, because of this amazing literature from the Middle East that was seeking pure wisdom.
But between ancient rabbis and us,
yes.
we have to have you see, because if not, I think that I have this that I started to read perhaps 2 lines and I never understood, so I just never looked at it again. And
what
now
is that? What book is that?
Oh, this is Midrash Rabbah.
Midrash Rabbah, right.
Yeah.
Look, it's very like the Torah is mechuseh. We just said that in the Midrash. The Torah is covered.
Yeah.
It's mutzna. It's hidden. It's secret. It's like in the biblical tradition, the Torah is exoteric. Its meaning is on the surface. In the biblical tradition, the meaning of the Torah is on the surface. In the rabbinic tradition, Torah is esoteric. The true meaning of Torah is hidden and can be uncovered only through exploring and playing and probing and thinking. And so that's a massive shift. Like, is the Torah esoteric or exoteric? Is the wisdom on the surface or is it underneath? And we inherited this tradition of the esoteric wisdom of the Torah, of the hidden wisdom of the Torah. And the rabbis themselves generate that. They created a tradition of esoteric wisdom. Now, oftentimes, naive Orthodox Jews talk as if that's just the nature of Torah. Like, the Torah has got all this hidden wisdom and it's like this magical thing and it reveals the nature of reality and all. But that idea had to come from somewhere. The idea that the Torah contains all wisdom is an idea which comes from the book of Proverbs and the Midrash on the book of Proverbs that we've just read. That's where that idea is articulated most clearly in the rabbinic tradition. So we've just, I don't know, Alan said, I felt a little bit bad when Alan said, well, I feel differently now about Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim, but like, I'm not trying to stop people believing. I don't want to kind of, I'm not trying to like stop people taking this tradition seriously. On the contrary, I want people to see how complicated it is and how interesting it is, and what the process is by which rabbinic Judaism develops. Like, what is this new way of thinking about Torah that the rabbis had that was so different from what had gone before, and that the book of Proverbs that we've been reading is one of the steps the rabbis use to get to this new way of understanding what Torah is. And it's because the book of Proverbs is not parochial and is talking about wisdom. I think what we did was actually that was very complicated, and I hope people sort of grasped some of it. But if you there is a recording, I'll turn off the recording there. But